8. Brock Turner. In a horrifying assault case that made worldwide headlines, 19-year-old Stanford University student Brock Turner assaulted an unconscious woman behind a dumpster on the school's campus in early 2015. 2 men caught him in the act while passing through the area on their bicycles. They confronted Turner, who attempted to flee the scene, and pinned him to the ground until law enforcement arrived. The cyclists were so traumatized by what they saw that they broke down in tears. Turner was charged with multiple crimes and banned from the university for life. Instead of taking responsibility for his wrongdoings, he fought the charges and tried to downplay the severity of his actions. He was ultimately convicted of 3 felonies. Prosecutors recommended a 6-year sentence, but the judge sentenced the convicted predator to just 6 months in county jail. He was released after serving just 3 months. The infamously lenient sentence was met by months of protest on the Stanford campus, along with widespread outrage across the US and elsewhere. Activists accused the judge, Aaron Persky, of deciding Turner's sentence based on race, gender, and class bias, and demanded his removal from the bench. The California Commission on Judicial Performance cleared Persky of any wrongdoing, and he retained his position until he was recalled by voters in 2018. While the justice system failed in the eyes of many, the court of public opinion continues to hold Turner accountable. In 2022, TikTokers in the Dayton, Ohio area used social media to warn women that had recently been seen in local bars and to caution them against leaving with him. In September of 2019, Turner's victim Chanel Miller went public with her story. During an interview with PBS NewsHour, she recalled feeling powerless and silenced as Turner's defense attorney tried to discredit her in court. Miller was even more insulted when Turner's father said in a statement that his son was paying a steep price for 20 minutes of action, especially after she went into great detail about her mental and emotional suffering while reading her own statement. Confident that the judge was going to set the matter straight and impose an appropriate punishment, Miller urged herself not to jump to conclusions. She was just as shocked as most other people when she learned how little time Turner would spend behind bars. Needless to say, the road to healing felt like an uphill battle, but she was nevertheless determined to overcome the pain and live a fulfilling life. 7. Brian Vela. 18-year-old Alyssa Noguera of Snohomish, Washington had overdosed on drugs and was in desperate need of medical help when her friend, Brian Vela, took advantage of her and assaulted her in February of 2017. According to law enforcement, Vela not only failed to call for help, but he mocked Noguera and sent explicit photos of her to his friends as she lay dying in his bed. While Noguera's mother sent her text messages reminding her to be safe, Vela blatantly told his friends that he knew the young woman was overdosing and didn't care because he was assaulting her to pass the time. After Noguera passed away, he tried to cover up her death by disposing of her body, but the police caught him and he was charged with multiple crimes. Vela told investigators that Noguera had snorted some crushed-up Percocet during a party at his mobile home. Tests later revealed that the pills contained a deadly combination of fentanyl and Xanax. In late 2018, Vela pleaded guilty to several charges, including second-degree manslaughter and unlawful disposal of human remains. Between the state sentencing limits and his status as a first-time offender, Superior Court Judge Linda Craze was limited to a 34-month sentence. Left with no harsher options, she imposed the maximum prison term. Craze admitted that the sentence was inadequate for Vela's actions and said that she understood why Noguera's friends and family were outraged by the outcome of the case. She even mentioned that she'd seen auto theft cases with more severe punishments, adding that she wasn't sure if lawmakers ever considered situations like this. During his sentencing hearing, Vela apologized for his actions and acknowledged that he deserved whatever punishment came his way. This came as little to no comfort for Noguera's mother, who described the sentence as a joke and a slap on the wrist. 6. Jonathan Pena. During a street race in Portland, Oregon in August of 2022, Jonathan Pena and his opponent collided with one another in an intersection while traveling at over 80 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. Pena lost control of his Ford Mustang and jumped to curb, fatally striking 26-year-old single mother Ashley McGill as she waited at a bus stop. McGill had no involvement in the race, according to police. She was simply an innocent bystander who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Both Pena and the other driver, Kenneth Joseph Freeman, were charged in connection with the senseless tragedy. In September of 2023, Freeman pleaded guilty to criminally negligent homicide. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Pena pleaded guilty to the same charge, along with reckless driving and recklessly endangering another person. After factoring in time served, the judge sentenced him to 3 years in prison, followed by 3 years of post-release supervision and 5 years of probation. He was also ordered to pay $5,000 in restitution. During his sentencing hearing, Pena apologized for his actions, saying that he felt he owed it to McGill's family to endure every trial and tribulation that comes with his sentence to ensure that justice was properly served. In a victim impact statement, McGill's mother told the young man that she hoped he saw Ashley and remembered his actions every time he closed his eyes for the rest of his life. 5. Brenda Spka. In May of 2018, 28-year-old Brenda Spka killed her new boyfriend, 26-year-old Chad O'Melia, in a frenzied knife attack at his apartment in Thousand Oaks, California. The couple had only been dating for a few weeks when the attack occurred. Responding officers found Spka next to O'Melia's body, crying hysterically while clutching the knife that she had just stabbed him dozens of times with. She'd also stabbed her dog, and when the police attempted to disarm her, she was uncooperative and ended up injured in the process. O'Melia was pronounced dead at the scene, and Spka was charged with his murder. Her defense attorneys argued that she committed the act in a state of cannabis-induced psychosis, claiming that their client was an inexperienced marijuana smoker. Under California law, a person is responsible for the things they do while intoxicated unless their intoxication was involuntary. Spka's lawyers told the court that she was already high off one bong hit when O'Melia pressured her to take a second hit. She had an adverse reaction to the pot, causing her to run into the bathroom in a panic. When she came out, she attacked O'Melia. After deliberating for just 4 hours, the jury found Spka guilty of the lesser charge of involuntary manslaughter. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to perform 100 hours of community service. While handing down the punishment, Ventura County Superior Court Judge David Worley concluded that Spka had no control over her behavior when she killed O'Melia. Spka's lawyer, Bob Schwartz, described the judge's decision as the right and courageous thing. O'Melia's father, Sean O'Melia, accused the judge of setting a dangerous precedent with the ruling by giving marijuana smokers throughout the state a license to kill and get away with it. The victim's uncle, Brandon, said that while there are no winners in the tragedy, there could have at least been accountability. 4. Wendy Munson. 57-year-old Wendy Munson was in the middle of teaching a second-grade class at a school in Live Oak, California in October of 2023, when her Sutter County deputies pulled her out of the classroom at 8:30 in the morning. A co-worker had noticed that she seemed intoxicated and called law enforcement. Munson's blood alcohol content was more than twice the legal limit, and surveillance footage showed her driving to the school just a little while earlier. She was arrested for drunk driving and child endangerment with the possibility of great bodily injury, but the charges were ultimately dropped. In a statement regarding the decision not to prosecute the case, District Attorney Jennifer Dupree admitted that teaching drunk is reprehensible, but she said that it's not illegal. She further explained that even with the footage of Munson pulling into the parking lot, it would be hard to prove that she arrived at the school drunk and that she didn't drink after arriving at work. Additionally, Dupree said that the DA's office was unable to prove that Munson had put her students in danger simply by being intoxicated. Munson is no longer listed as a teacher on the school's website. It's unclear whether she's still working as a teacher. 3. Sean Tonkin. 42-year-old John Mike Roan Jr. was hanging out with his girlfriend and some other people outside a Kansas City, Missouri liquor store on the 4th of July in 2023 when a white man approached him and began hurling racial slurs seemingly for no reason. Surveillance footage showed the suspect, 36-year-old Sean W. Tonkin, disappearing behind the store while Roan followed him with a club-like object in his hand. Just moments later, Roan uttered, "He stabbed me," and collapsed backwards onto the ground with a pair of fatal stab wounds to the chest. Tonkin fled the scene and was picked up a half hour later by police, who found him covered in blood and carrying a knife. Authorities condemned his racist behavior, but only charged him with misdemeanor counts of disturbing the peace and methamphetamine possession, despite eyewitness accounts that had openly stated that he was intent on killing a black man. The racist nature of the attack was particularly hurtful to Roan's family, who described him as a nice person who never judged anyone by the color of their skin. Officials told the public that they wanted to investigate the incident more in order to determine who started it and whether or not Tonkin's actions qualified as non-criminal under Missouri's Stand Your Ground law. In December of 2023, federal prosecutors stepped in and charged Tonkin with committing a racially motivated hate crime resulting in death. The case appears to be ongoing, and it's unclear whether Tonkin's being held in custody in the meantime. 2. Julia Gilstein. January 6, 2021 is infamously known as the day when rioters stormed the US Capitol in a rampage, hoping to restore power to former President Donald Trump. But there were other events going on that day, including a Black Lives Matter protest and a medical freedom protest at the Connecticut State Capitol. Activist Karen Prescott was attending the Black Lives Matter rally when she inadvertently crossed paths with 44-year-old Julia Gilstein, who was attending the medical freedom event in opposition to government-mandated childhood vaccines. According to Prescott and other witnesses, Gilstein began yelling offensive statements like "Black lives don't matter." She also wasn't wearing a COVID mask, so Prescott told her to back away. Footage of the altercation appeared to show Gilstein spitting in Prescott's face and storming off. Gilstein reportedly admitted to spitting on Prescott, but she wasn't arrested until the protesters demanded that law enforcement take action. She was eventually charged with third-degree assault, risk of injury to a minor, and deprivation of rights, which is a hate crime. Prescott was very vocal about her belief that the attack was racially motivated, but Gilstein denied this in court, arguing through her attorney that she was simply reacting in a heated environment while failing to provide a substantial reason for why she spat on Prescott. The judge ultimately dropped the charges, including the hate crime count, and sentenced Gilstein to a special probation program called Accelerated Rehabilitation. Designed for first-time offenders, it gives defendants a chance to avoid a conviction as long as they complete certain requirements set forth by the court. In Gilstein's case, the main contingency was to undergo 100 hours of anti-hate education. To Prescott and many others, this was a far cry from justice. She left the hearing in tears, saying that she felt like she'd just been spat on again, this time by the criminal justice system. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Jayen Loby. 26-year-old Memphis police officer Joseph McKinney and the suspect he was pursuing, 18-year-old Jayen Loby, were both killed in a pre-dawn shootout in April of 2024. According to law enforcement, the pursuit began when police responded to a report about a suspicious vehicle and found Loby sleeping in an Infiniti with a broken window. In addition to the deaths of McKinney and Loby, 2 officers survived with gunshot wounds. Just weeks earlier, Loby had been arrested for stealing cars. Prosecutors urged the court to set bail at $150,000, but the judge set the amount at just $10,000. 2 days after that hearing, Loby was released without bail and a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew. Speaking anonymously with local station WREG, one of Loby's car theft victims said that she believed the tragic shootout could have been prevented if the teen had not been released from jail. She said that when she learned Loby had been cut loose, her reaction was to think he was going to continue committing crimes. The woman believes that if the young man had been held properly accountable for his actions, both his and Officer McKinney's lives would have been saved. But as they say, hindsight is 20/20, and it's unfortunately too late for the court to go back in time and handle the situation differently.
Number 10. An unfair ruling. It's no surprise that when it comes to criminals being sentenced to life in jail, they don't always take the news very well, and really, who can blame them? Someone ordering you to spend the rest of your life behind bars is a pretty good reason to freak out. But then again, the sentence is usually deserving of the crime committed. Take the case of Regina Johnson, a 60-year-old woman from San Carlos who shot her husband and daughter to death and then stayed inside their home for 3 days with the dead bodies. This was a horrendous crime, and she got a matching sentence to boot. Superior Court Judge Joan Weber sentenced her to spend 15 years to life for each murder, plus an additional charge of 25 to life for using a gun. The total was 80 years to life, and Regina flipped out. But she flipped out in a rather strange way. After lashing out at the judge and getting scolded by her attorney, she then read a letter out loud to her dead daughter, saying how much she loved her and would never hurt her despite the fact that she shot her and killed her. I mean, the whole thing's pretty bizarre, and it's important to note that her daughter was only 14 years old when she shot her in the back of the head for no apparent reason. Dang, Gina. Come on. Number 9. Serious regret. Our next freakout came from a man in Iowa who was recently sentenced to 50 years in prison after brutally beating a toddler to death. This is truly a disgusting crime with absolutely no excuse, and Dustin Armstrong got exactly what he deserved. But of course, he had some serious regret. After the sentencing was given to him in the courtroom, Armstrong lost his marbles. I mean, he was okay at first, but when he got up to leave, he spotted his mother and the rest of his family in and totally lost control. He sat down hard in his seat and began to weep uncontrollably. Now, whether he committed this crime intentionally or not, he definitely felt the horror of what he did. And that was pretty clear when he folded over himself, buried his head in his hands, and refused to get up while he bawled his eyes out. If you ask me, he's going to be doing a lot more crying throughout the rest of his life in prison, and it sounds like he definitely deserves to. Hey, real quick, if you're new to the channel, welcome and thanks for checking us out. Give this video a like and hit that subscribe button for more World List videos just like this one. Number 8. Attacked in the courtroom. Not every courtroom freakout is done by the convict. When Michael Madison was recently sentenced to die in East Cleveland courtroom after killing 3 women and then trying to dispose of their bodies by wrapping them in garbage bags, a father of one of the victims lashed out and attacked Mr. Madison. He tried to leap across the room and probably would have bludgeoned him to death if he hadn't been held back. Michael Madison was sentenced to die by lethal injection for the aggravated murders of 3 girls. And halfway through the statement from their father, he lunged at Madison. And I mean, this probably wasn't totally unexpected. After all, it must have been really difficult staring into the eyes of the man who killed his daughter without intense anger boiling up in his soul. The attacker didn't manage to get his hands on Madison, as a whole lot of deputies stepped in and ripped the man away, but he certainly tried his best. Madison was unharmed and the victim's father was escorted from the courtroom, but in the end, Michael Madison would die from lethal injection anyway. Number 7. Classic freakout. Our next freakout is a classic, but the story behind it is a little strange. It starts with the death of Jason Nyberg inside of the Minnesota Correctional Facility. Melissa then pleaded guilty to her boyfriend's murder and was sentenced to 86 months in prison, which was far above the minimum sentence that Melissa and her attorney had been hoping for. Following the sentence, Melissa had an outburst. She began to lash out at the judge, screaming that she had never meant for Jason to die and that he was her best friend, that she already felt guilty about what had happened and had no intentions of killing him. She even screamed at the judge that she had made a mistake and was not planning on murdering the love of her life. It was a huge scene, but of course, the judge was stone cold and shut her down. In the end, Melissa would be spending a significant amount of time thinking about the decision she made behind bars. Number 6. Chris McNab. Chris McNab was one of the most ruthless villains to pass through the justice system. Chris, along with his wife Courtney, were both sentenced to life in jail for murdering their innocent daughter who was only 2 years old. A jury deliberated for less than 1 hour before handing out the harsh sentences. Chris was convicted on 8 counts, and his girlfriend was convicted on 3 counts, one of them including murder in the 2nd degree. Chris got life without parole and an additional 10 years in case he became a zombie and still needed to be locked up. As for his girlfriend, she received 15 years in prison and 15 years of probation. After the sentencing, Chris had a little freakout. He declared to the courtroom that he was innocent, that he would never commit the crime he was charged with, and that the judge was making a huge mistake. Although it was pretty hard to take Chris seriously with his face and neck covered in what appeared to be gang tattoos. Chris McNab went on a long tirade about his innocence and told the judge that whoever really did kill his baby should get the maximum life sentence. In response, the judge gave him the maximum life sentence. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time, man. Number 5. 12 life sentences. Believe it or not, some of the best courtroom freakouts actually come from the judge, not the convict. When Dondre Shabazz was given 12 consecutive life sentences in a Fulton County courtroom, County Superior Court Judge Alfred J. Dempsey Jr. told the convict exactly what he thought of him. His exact words to the convict were, "True justice would be to put you in a room with your victims and turn them loose on you." It's a pretty bold statement to come from a judge. He also added that, of course, the law would not allow such a thing to happen, and so the worst thing that he could do to him was give him every single day in jail that he could, which resulted in 12 consecutive life sentences. This came after Mr. Shabazz was found guilty of 24 out of 25 counts of some seriously bad crimes, including sexual assault, robbery, and kidnapping. He was found guilty of sexually assaulting at least a dozen women at gunpoint throughout Atlanta between the years of 2002 and 2005. And by the way the judge freaked out on this guy, it seemed that he was close to getting out of his chair and beating the man with his own gavel. And yeah, I mean, kinda who could blame him? Number 4, Leon Montgomery. Here we have yet another man who was convicted for killing a small child. Leon Montgomery of Louisville, Kentucky, was recently convicted for the death of his son Noah, who had only been 5 months old at the time. Apparently, Leon Montgomery had beat the infant with his fist in such a brutal way that limbs were broken and bones were fractured. This guy deserved every single second of the 30-year sentence the judge passed down on him. But of course, he wasn't going to be hauled off to prison without some words of his own. After the judgment was made, which everyone on Earth can probably agree was completely justified, Montgomery then screamed profanity at the judge, telling him to eat his blank. It was clear that Montgomery had no remorse for what he had done and was more inconvenienced by the sentencing than he was upset with himself. The judge held Montgomery in contempt and then sentenced him to an extra 6 months in jail for using such foul language in the courtroom. Number 3, 99 years. If you ever find yourself on trial, I recommend refraining from an outburst. Just ask Desmond Jones how far an outburst can get you. This guy was being sentenced by a Dallas County jury for kidnapping and murdering a 13-year-old girl named Siobhan Randall. This crime was committed in 2017, and the authorities believe that it was in retaliation to a drug deal. Desmond Jones was sentenced to life in prison for his involvement in the girl's tragic murder. But during the punishment part of the trial, Jones got in a verbal argument with someone in the gallery, and the two started screaming back and forth. The judge had to order the person in the gallery to leave, and Jones had to be forced back into his seat. Then, while Jones' younger sister was trying to be a character witness for her brother, he stood up abruptly and shouted, "It don't even matter no more," and was then taken into custody and dragged out of the courtroom while screaming incoherently. At first, the sentence was going to be around 20 years to life, but after a bit of deliberation by the jury following the freakouts, they sentenced him to 99 years behind bars, ensuring that he would never get out. I guess it don't even matter no more to Jones. Number 2, 6 more years. Manson M. Bryant of Ohio had already been found guilty of aggravated robbery, abduction, aggravated burglary, carrying concealed weapons, and kidnapping. But during his sentencing trial, Manson got a little fed up with the judge and began to throw derogatory remarks at him and the rest of the court. What should have been a normal sentencing turned into an absolute nightmare for Manson, who just couldn't control himself. The judge gave him 22 years, and when Manson verbally exploded and hurled obscenities at the judge, he then received 6 more. This is kind of like the teacher adding an extra hour to your detention for talking back, only it's extra years of a man's life behind bars. Of course, Manson definitely deserved it. According to the court records, he caused massive psychological harm to the people he kidnapped. And some of his victims experienced serious economic difficulties after Manson was finished with them. The 6 extra years were definitely deserved. Number 1, violence in the courtroom. And finally, we come to a brawl in a courtroom. 2 men were recently arrested after they attacked their mother's killer in a courtroom during the killer's trial. This happened again in Ohio, where a lot of these freakouts seem to come from. Dale Williams was to be sentenced in 2017 after he confessed to running his ex-girlfriend off the road and then shooting her to death. This was a terrible crime, and the woman he killed left behind an extremely hurt and angry family. In the courtroom, one of the woman's sons ran for Williams, sprung over a table, and attacked him. Then the other son joined the fight, and it turned into a huge ballroom brawl. The sons managed to get a few shots off on the killer before they were eventually subdued with a stun gun and arrested. When being handcuffed by officers, one of the men screamed, "He killed my mother, man." And yeah, you can definitely sympathize with him.
Thanks for watching. Would you rather have a boss who always blames the wrong people for things that go wrong, or a co-worker who constantly gets away with knowingly doing a bad job? Let us know in the comments below and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.